Welcome in on a Wednesday, everybody. I'm Reed Cowan. New blasts in Lebanon a day after pagers blew up targeting Hezbollah. Now even more concerned about a widened regional conflict as Israel declares a new phase of war. Plus, we're watching Capitol Hill in the United States. At this hour, lawmakers work to avoid a government shutdown. The big question on everybody's mind, is the GOP spending bill already doomed? You're watching CBS News 24/7. Let's go. Right off of our monitors, breaking news out of Beirut. More explosions today, and you're seeing the aftermath here on this monitor behind me. So yesterday, exploding pagers. Today, exploding Hezbollah walkie-talkies and solar equipment. The explosions happened just moments ago. You can, in fact, see some of the smoke rising behind that ambulance. So here's what we know at this hour. Lebanon's health ministry says at least 9 people killed, dozens injured. Hezbollah reeling after yesterday's explosions of thousands of handheld pagers that blew up almost simultaneously all across Lebanon. In that attack yesterday, at least 12 killed, including 2 children. Hezbollah leaders blame Israel. They vow a severe retaliation. CBS News 24/7 streaming coast to coast and worldwide will continue watching that story throughout this hour. As soon as news breaks, we'll bring it to you. Let's come home now to the United States. Big news when it comes to your wallet. In fact, in about an hour, the Federal Reserve is expected to cut interest rates. If you're thinking you haven't heard that in a while, you have not. It's been about 4 years. So we're watching Wall Street right now in real time. The Dow streaming to our monitors showing reaction right there. Kind of a shrug. We're in positive territory, but not gangbusters. CBS News business analyst Jill Schlesinger joins us live. Now, Jill, some say 1/4 percentage point. Some hope for a 1/2 point. There are ramifications if the Fed goes either way. What are you hearing as Wall Street reacts?
I want everyone to just take a deep breath, whether it's 1/4 or a 1/2 percentage point. It really doesn't matter. This is just the beginning of a longer process. The Federal Reserve is going to lower interest rates because it feels like it has tamed inflation, maybe not vanquished, but certainly tamed and beaten it back. And the reason why we're seeing a rate cut at this point is that we're seeing the labor market start to really diminish some. I mean, we're not seeing huge job losses across the board, but we're seeing a slowdown. And remember, the Fed's got 2 jobs. We want an economy that grows fast enough to create jobs, but not too fast to create inflation. So whether it's 1/4 or a 1/2, it kind of doesn't matter. We are going to see lower interest rates, and it's going to be a process probably over the course of the next 1.5 years or even 2 years.
All right, so we'll continue watching that on the calendar, hopefully for more improvement. How will these cuts really impact Americans, and when do we expect them to take effect, Jill?
You know, it's so funny because when we have a Fed meeting, I get really amped up for it. I really do, because I feel like it's one of the few things in the economy that everybody feels in some way. So I know your eyes are glazing back when you hear Federal Reserve, but either you're a borrower or a saver in this economy, right? And if you're a borrower, you're rooting for interest rates to go down. And, you know, listen, again, even though it's not going to end at this meeting, this is the signal that borrowers are going to start to see lower interest rates. Now, we've seen it in some of the mortgage markets already. And so the Fed doesn't directly control mortgage markets, but the 30-year fixed rate mortgage came down from a high of 8%. Now we're at about 6.25%. And so I think we're going to start to slowly see mortgage rates drift down. If you have an outstanding balance on your credit card, you're not going to see a point per point reduction with the Federal Reserve, but interest rates will start to slide. People who are buying cars, they're going to start to see lower interest rates for those car loans. So that's great news. On the other side, if you're a saver, you're saying, wait, I loved those 5 and 5.5% juicy CD rates. Those are going to go away. And so what we are going to likely see is that if you're a saver, you're not going to be seeing as large an amount of credit, interest credited to your accounts, and you won't see such great, beautiful CD rates as you once did. Look, rates are still high. They've got to come down a bunch. So either way, if you are a saver, I think it is good to know that you should probably lock in rates if you have a need maybe in 2 years for some money. That's something you may want to do right now because interest rates will be heading lower.
Good things to think about. Jill, to my twin 16-year-old boys, no, you cannot get a car loan even if the rates go down.
No.
Thank you so much.
No.
Definitely. Hey, our video monitor is also bringing us new developments in that bombshell case against hip-hop star Sean Diddy Combs. So here's what we know at this hour. The judge denied Combs bail. His legal team requested an appeal, so that means a hearing will happen in just a few hours' time. So if the judge says no, Diddy goes back to jail in Brooklyn until a new trial. Combs has already told the judge he's not guilty of 3 charges, including sex trafficking and racketeering. So if a jury finds him guilty, think about this. The man who once lived in mansions could end up behind bars for life. CBS News anchor and national correspondent Jerika Duncan is where that action is at the courthouse, where that appeals hearing will happen soon. Jerika, we're already getting kind of a preview of the arguments that will be made in court today. What are you seeing?
That's right. You know, we did get a little bit of that yesterday, but now based on a document that I was able to obtain that was filed this morning, we get a better and clearer picture of what Combs's attorney, Mark Agnifilo, will say. First and foremost, he said he wants to focus on the action since March when he became the attorney for P. Diddy Combs, Sean P. Diddy Combs. And he said that it was clear then that he was cooperating with the criminal justice system when there were charges that seemed like they were coming for the actions that were from that civil lawsuit going back to November of 2023, when it was clear that federal prosecutors were then looking into investigating him for criminal charges. His attorney, Sean Diddy Combs' attorney, says that is when he started to cooperate from day one by issuing or giving up all of his passports. He talks about in this motion surrendering and coming to New York, flying from Miami, coming to New York, knowing that this would happen. Also, the bail package, which included $50 million bond secured by a home that Combs just paid off in Florida that's worth $48 million. He talked about having home detention with GPS monitoring, weekly drug testing. These are all things that they presented yesterday, but will be talked about in more detail in terms of stipulations so that he could be free. They also go into constant communication with the federal prosecutors. This is something that was shown, but we're going to see some of those emails that are in exhibits where the attorney for Combs is emailing the federal prosecutors every time that Combs travels domestically over the last 6 months. But obviously prosecutors disagree with all of that and say that Combs is a serial obstructor and a serial abuser. But listen to some of the comments that we were able to get from the attorney just moments ago.
He's in the special housing unit, which is a very difficult place to be. It's one of the things I'm going to take up with the judge today, that it's impossible to prepare for a trial from where he is. So we have a bail hearing application at 3:30 today, and I hope that we prevail.
So what you heard again from that attorney is saying it would be better for his client if he was at home and able to prepare for a trial. What's so interesting about all of this, as you noted at the top of this broadcast, is that this is someone that is not used to obviously being behind bars, but the idea of possibly being there for a year or more, because that's roughly how long it could take before a trial date is set, Reed.
An enormous amount of evidence. I can see why it would take so long for both sides to comb through that evidence. Jerika, what happens after that appeals hearing to Sean Combs? Say he gets his way, what happens? And if he does not get his way, where does he go?
Yeah, great question. So if he is able to get released, he has to make sure he stays within the confines of those conditions, that bail package, and maybe perhaps the judge or prosecutors add something that is not already proposed in the package. But if this judge says, no, I agree with what the first judge decided and you have to go back to jail, then that's exactly what will happen. We're not sure where he will be taken at this very moment. But it would be an inconvenience, according to Combs' attorney, as they get ready for trial, which we don't know when that could be. I even heard Ricky Kleeman, one of our CBS News analysts, saying that it could be 2 years. So you just don't know. We really don't know.
Jerika Duncan, CBS News anchor and national correspondent, thank you so much for breaking that down. Always great to see you on the stream. When we come back, we are watching moves on the campaign trail, a live conversation with CBS News senior White House correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Stay with us. Welcome back. Our live feeds now take us to cameras pointed at Baltimore. If you are waking up in Baltimore, or if you are about to go out for a sandwich, or a cup of coffee, look up because you see some skies that are about to deliver quite a bit of juice today, Jess.
All right, that's my favorite thing to do is go grab a sandwich in Baltimore. Now, in reality, what's going on as we head into the next couple of days, we're still dealing with some active weather. The tropics are relatively calm right now. The National Hurricane Center is just kind of anticipating the next storm. However, up in Boston, if you zoom in just a little bit, you can even see that storm. It's the leftovers of potential Tropical Cyclone 8. And that system alone has brought in a lot of active weather for us all along the East Coast for quite some time. I mean, we saw impressive storm surge numbers, about 1 to 3 feet just along South Carolina and North Carolina as the storm system started moving in. It started decaying pretty quick once it hit landfall. However, as we take a look at Futurecast, it's continuing to impact all that East Coast, anywhere from New Jersey stretching up into Delaware throughout the next 48 hours. We're going to continue to track that active weather in areas like New York with not necessarily nearly as impressive numbers as up in Boston. We could still anticipate another inch up there. Flood advisories were in effect yesterday. It's starting to calm down now, but this is one of the active systems that we have right now. Heading into the next couple days, the big focus right now is now on states like Montana, all the way down into Texas, as they're dealing with some active weather. We'll have more on that coming in a bit, Reed. But for now, as we head into the next couple days, the tropics, like I mentioned, they're staying relatively calm. Reed?
All right, Jess, thank you so much. So let's go to some headlines right now, if we can. You can see there is some fallout there with the Baltimore bridge collapse. Here's what we know so far. CBS News 24/7 moving on the map to Baltimore, where the Justice Department filed suit over that bridge collapse. What do they want? $100 million in cleanup costs. That's the amount the government says it spent to clear underwater debris to reopen the port after a ship lost power and struck a support column on the Francis Scott Key Bridge. That happened in March. That lawsuit alleges the electrical and mechanical system on the ship were improperly maintained. So let's jump the map now to the state of Hawaii, where the FBI raided the Hawaiian home of the man arrested in the suspected assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump in Florida over the weekend. So here's what we know here. They are on the hunt for any evidence about what motivated Ryan Ruth. Evidence is needed to be able to tie Ruth to being at the golf club with a motive to harm or kill the former president of the United States. And while they search, journalists in Hawaii reveal stories about Ruth's run-ins with former customers of his own company. Those customers said to have reported Ruth's tiny home business left their projects in a mess and caused them to lose thousands of dollars. Let's talk big business, from thousands to millions. Boeing CEO says the company will begin furloughing executives and other non-union workers to save cash during the strike. Talks continue today between Boeing and workers. The company and its striking employees failed to agree on issues of wages and pensions yesterday, so they are back at it today. Those workers allege the company is not taking the mediation seriously. Striking workers are also a drumbeat in the nation when it comes to auto workers. The United Auto Workers' Sean Fain says their union plans to hold a strike authorization vote against Stellantis, also over contract issues. The union's claim: Stellantis failed to upload contract commitments made in 2023. When we come back, we're going to be talking to senior White House correspondent Ed O'Keefe about what's going on in the election. Stay with us. CBS News 24/7 back after the break. Welcome back, everybody. So the clock is ticking ahead of voters deciding who will be our nation's next president. Vice President Kamala Harris meeting with key voting groups addressing the Congressional Hispanic caucus in Washington, D.C. She had this to say about migration at the border. Listen.
We must also reform our broken immigration system and protect our dreamers and understand we can do both. Create an earned pathway to citizenship and ensure our border is secure. We can do both, and we must do both. And while we fight to move our nation forward to a brighter future,
can and must do both. So let's talk about that. Live right now, CBS News senior White House correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Ed, everything these candidates say is a potential headline. What came out of her speech to the Hispanic caucus?
Oh, this was a pretty standard version of what she's been saying out on the stump, Reed, but saying it to a key constituency here in Washington, one she's worked with through the years. I'm going to take these off because it's getting foggy here for some reason. The Hispanic caucus has several dozen members in the House and the Senate. She's worked with them first as a senator from California, then as vice president. They hold their annual conference this week. where they gather together to hear from various stakeholders, and she shows up as vice president. The president's going to address them tomorrow night to, in essence, say thank you and let's keep working on things. And most notably in her remarks, there was a little more detailed conversation about immigration, there was a little more detailed conversation about abortion and about the economy. And those three things, obviously, top of mind for most voters, and they are for Hispanic voters as well. On the issue of immigration, what was interesting, at least to my ear, was she called out the fact that Trump continues to say he supports the mass deportation of undocumented immigrants. Well, she asked the question, as was asked of him last week in the debate, how would that work? What would it take? And is the country really ready for the separation of families yet again, as we've seen in the early days of the Trump administration? Now, notable that she says this on a day when there's a new survey out, a new national survey that suggests the majority of Americans support the mass deportation of undocumented immigrants. Something like 8 in 10 Republicans, a good handful of independents, and overall a majority of Americans agree with that. So she may actually be on the wrong side of that issue, even as she raises questions about the details, as has been raised with Trump directly before, of how exactly that would work.
You could hear in her words when she emphasized and protect our dreamers, where she is on that issue. So let's talk about the dreamers and others like them, young voters. We're seeing a lot of candidates all over social media courting those young voters. Harris meeting with youth organizers in a virtual event in the coming hours. That's ahead. So how does this really reveal the strategy where the young vote is concerned this cycle?
Well, Reed, it's important to remember, most of those dreamers are not young anymore. They are in their 40s. They are in their 30s. They're having children. They're getting married. They're trying to buy homes and they're trying to have careers. Because remember, dreamers, as was originally defined during the Obama years, was people in their 20s and 30s at the most. They've now grown up. So those that are technically still eligible and called dreamers are much older now than they were when this conversation began. But by talking about that issue generally, you are speaking to families with mixed legal status in this country, of whom, yes, there are many that are young. And so by doing that and emphasizing her concern and her focus on them, it resonates with those younger voters in places like Nevada, Arizona, even in communities in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, and Michigan, where Latino populations are growing. And so emphasizing that, mentioning them, is something that a Latino voter or those that are active in campaigns are going to want to hear her stressing, because it allows them to go out and remind those voters that, in fact, she does care about them or she is worried about that issue. But important also to remember, most dreamers, as originally defined during the Obama era, are now folks in their 40s having kids of their own, well advanced in their careers.
You make me think of Astrid Silva of the state of Nevada, who is one of the very prominent dreamers I've had the opportunity to interview and get to know personally as well. Ed O'Keefe, thank you. Glasses or not, you always help us to see clearer. Nice to talk to you on the stream. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump holding a rally later today on Long Island, his first since Sunday's apparent assassination attempt in Florida. Law enforcement saying we're not going to take any chances, so security will be heightened during Trump's visit to Nassau Coliseum in Uniondale. Also, Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, is in North Carolina today. He's holding a campaign event there in Raleigh, North Carolina, prime political real estate. Our live feeds now take us to Miami. They call it the Magic City, but it is feeling the heat, definitely. A heat advisory in effect right now. And Jess, we're going to bring you in to talk about that. It's not only hot, but in Miami. I've lived there. I know down there on Brickell Key where that camera is, hot means sticky as well.
Oh, I mean, I lived over in Daytona Beach too. I know exactly what you're talking about. That relative humidity, when it's high, they are dealing with some really hot temperatures. Now, Jacksonville's only sitting at 86 today. However, relative humidity is high there. You add about 5 to 10 degrees to anywhere throughout Florida, and that's the feels like temperature. We continue to track all the way off over into different states now, though. I want to show you what's going on for us as we head into the coming days, specifically when it comes to storms stretching anywhere from Rapid City over into Denver, all the way over into Billings. It almost looks like a comma underneath me right now of a storm system. And as we take a look behind me, I'll show you the exact reason why we see that quote unquote comma effect as we head into the coming days. The storm system, it's an area of low pressure. It's continuing to ring out some active thunderstorm activity stretching from Nebraska all the way up into the Dakotas and everywhere in between. Also over into Montana too, where there's active rain right now. Futurecast showing the next 24 hours, though, this storm system will calm down a little bit and then gain some strength over cities like Omaha, stretching all the way into Chicago as we head into the next 24 hours. with some active thunderstorm activity expected. The severe weather outlook currently showing a slight risk just along that state line of South Dakota and, of course, Minnesota, too. We continue to keep a close eye on that exact same region where they could see some large hail threat anywhere from there all the way over into Nebraska, too. We also continue to keep a close eye on damaging winds and a tornado threat as well. So very active weather right now. We're continuing to keep a close eye on that. But for now, thank you. Over to you, Reed.
All right, video out of Hungary to our monitors, and look at this. An entire village underwater there. You see at one point somebody said, hey, let's build some homes on the edge of these trees. Now the water is right up to the edge of the trees, and now the rooftops of the homes are approaching the water's edge there. Boats, the only way to get around after severe flooding, hit that central and eastern European country. Huge dumps of rain leaving a trail of destruction. In fact, we understand all the way from Romania and into Poland. And this morning, as we learn of 23 deaths in that region, the Pope prayed for victims, seen here offering that prayer in Vatican City. Our video feeds bring us these images you see here behind me out of Greece. Sort of difficult to see because it's night video, but there you go. Workers there had to evacuate a lot of people after a fire broke out inside a major oil refinery there. You can see the flames there against the backdrop of the water. They're trying to get onto those flames. This is over near Athens. Crews dousing those flames as that smoke pours out. And in Portugal, firefighters are battling wildfires from the air and the ground. Look at that, thick brush giving the fire a lot of fuel to eat up. So far in this firefight, we are hearing from the front lines, 6 people have lost their lives, thousands evacuated. When we come back, we're going to be talking about trying to avoid a government shutdown. A spending bill is on the table and much more. Lawmakers in Washington, D.C. trying to be heard and trying to get the votes they need to get legislation through. We'll be back in just a minute. So our video monitors are taking back to that unfolding situation in Lebanon as we learn more about the explosions blamed right now on Israel. At the same time, we're learning new details about the exploding pagers and solar equipment that killed several and wounded others connected to Hezbollah. Here's some of the BBC News coverage from moments ago as Israel declares a new phase of war.
We were in Dahir, which is the Hezbollah stronghold in the southern suburbs of Beirut, and at around 5 o'clock in the afternoon here, when the funeral of 4 of the people who were killed in the attacks yesterday was about to start, there was a loud explosion, and then reports of explosions happening in other parts of the country as well. And now we just had an update from the Lebanese health ministry saying that 9 people have been killed across Lebanon today after a new wave of explosions that affected radios. According to them, walkie-talkies, another target in these attacks, and more than 300 people have been injured. So another wave of attacks. This obviously a day after those explosions that happened yesterday when pagers that had been distributed by Hezbollah to its fighters, to its members, exploded. 12 people were killed, and including a girl who was 8 and an 11-year-old boy. And the funeral of this boy was about to take place when the explosion happened. That didn't happen. And again, this happened in a country that was shocked by what happened yesterday and was angered as well, because those explosions yesterday happened as people were in shops, were with their families at home. And today, another wave of explosions, another humiliation for Hezbollah, because it does suggest that Israel has managed to infiltrate the network used by the group, the communications network that has been used by Hezbollah. So obviously the group has vowed to respond to what happened yesterday, and tomorrow we're going to hear from Hassan Nasrallah, the powerful Hezbollah leader, who's going to be addressing his supporters, and I think we're going to see an indication of what he could be planning to do.
You're going to be hearing this phrase a lot in the coming days, serious risk of escalation. So here's Secretary of State Antony Blinken warning all parties not escalate the tensions further. Listen.
The United States did not know about, nor was it involved in these incidents, and we're still gathering the information and gathering the facts. Broadly speaking, we've been very clear, and we remain very clear, about the importance of all parties avoiding any steps that could further escalate the conflict that we're trying to resolve in Gaza, to see it spread to other fronts.
So let's bring in CBS News intelligence and national security correspondent Olivia Gosses. Okay, so Olivia, you just heard the Secretary of State there. What more are we learning about today's explosions? And also, how can we de-escalate when this seems like an escalation, the definition of escalation?
It's a great question, Reed. And these operations appear to have all of the trappings of a sophisticated and methodical intelligence operation, apparently involving multiple countries and a careful, methodical infiltration of the supply chains involved in building and issuing these devices. As you've heard, the U.S. is denying any and all knowledge and involvement in everything that has come to pass in the past 48 hours and is urging calm and restraint, not only from Hezbollah, which, as you heard, has already vowed harsh revenge, but from Iran, whose ambassador to Lebanon was injured yesterday as part of these attacks. Western officials had just begun breathing sighs of relief that a broader retaliatory strike from Iran in retaliation for the assassination of a top Hamas official in Tehran in July did not come to pass. And now, unfortunately, the specter of escalation is again pervading the region at exactly the wrong time as the U.S. is working to get a ceasefire deal across the finish line.
So, Olivia, stay with us because I want to get your reaction to something for our viewers. We just want to let you know, Mr. Blinken also touched on negotiations with Israel shortly after that meeting. And we also heard from some of the families of some of the hostages still held in Gaza by Hamas. They're calling for both sides to get into a ceasefire agreement and to do it soon. Here's what they had to say.
The Israeli government hasn't been as interested to reach a deal at times, and we've seen Hamas not interested in reaching deal at times, and we're trying to get into the timing where both sides have similar interests. Unfortunately, right now, it feels like none of the sides have any interest, and we're here to be the voice for our family members and make sure that the administration and other nations are putting all the necessary pressure to bring Israel and Hamas again to the table and to reach an agreement where our kids, our family members, our husbands and wives and grandparents are coming back.
And Olivia, if I am that father or that relative of somebody who is being held by Hamas in Gaza right now, I'm looking at all of this and wondering, can an escalation do anything to help? And really the question is, can these negotiations really give these families what they're asking for?
Sure. I don't know about anything to help. It seems like they could do everything to hurt the process, right? These families have been pleading with their respective governments for almost a year now for some resolution that would see their loved ones freed from captivity in Gaza. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Cairo right now in Egypt, trying to broker some sort of progress on these talks that have been lurching forward in fits and starts. The main goal of this trip, or a core goal of this trip, was to see if he could bring closer to fruition a bridging proposal that would be disseminated among the parties to sort of close the gaps on the main sticking points. We know one of them is whether and how many Israeli forces can remain in Gaza to patrol the Philadelphia corridor in southern Gaza, something that Hamas and Egypt have raised objections to. There are also questions about how many and what type of Palestinian prisoners could be released eventually in exchange for these hostages. But as you've noted, Reed, these escalating tensions in the region are not doing very much to facilitate progress on the talks and maybe meaningfully hampering them instead.
Olivia, thank you so much for that report. We're going to need your reporting in the days to come. We appreciate it. So our video feeds now take us back to the United States. You're looking live at Capitol Hill, where at this hour, all eyes are on members of the U.S. House of Representatives. They are expected to vote on Speaker Mike Johnson's short-term funding bill to try to avert a government shutdown and keep the money flowing. Well, last week's sticking point is now this week's sticking point. It's a measure built in that will require proof of citizenship when people go to register to vote. Here's Johnson's defense of that.
Congress has a role at the federal level to make sure federal elections are secure. It is against federal law for non-U.S. citizens to vote in U.S. elections. But we have no mechanism right now to ensure that in the states because they're not allowed to ask for proof of verification of citizenship when someone registers to vote. We've had a number of states already do audits. They found thousands of illegals already on the rolls. This is a serious problem because some of our elections are decided by razor-thin margins.
CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane once again joining us on the stream live from Capitol Hill. Scott, this is the same package that Johnson pulled last week. He was going to coalition build over the weekend. How does he think this vote will pass today?
There's no indication that coalition has been sufficiently built. It's possible this vote, which is expected in the dinner hour here on the East Coast, could evaporate just before it starts. He needs to secure enough Republican votes to get the majority here because Democrats are not on board this plan. There are several things they don't like about it, one of which is the Speaker has attached this thing called the SAVE Act, which would make it unlawful for undocumented immigrants to vote in federal elections. Democrats say it's already unlawful for them to do so. They haven't been doing so, and just having this debate infuses baseless conspiracy theories about voting. But the Republican support isn't necessarily there. There are a number of Republicans who don't like these short-term spending deals. What's more, this isn't even really a short-term one. It would go 6 months through March 28th. That's a non-starter with a bunch of people. We'll see if they even have this vote at the end of the day.
We will see. We know you'll be there. There are other news-making events happening in Congress today, Scott, not the least of which the fact that in about an hour from now, top executives from major tech giants are set to testify. They'll be bellying up to the microphones. What will they say and why?
They're going to talk about potential efforts to interfere with our election through social media platforms. They're having this testimony on the same day we've been told U.S. senators will get a behind-closed-doors confidential security briefing about potential international threats to our elections. And all this comes on the heels of a Department of Justice case filed earlier this month in which they allege there was Russian interference, some of it with a Kremlin playbook to use U.S.-based companies and social media influencers to impact voters and their thoughts. We'll see what comes of the public testimony, but it's that behind closed doors briefing that also may have some interesting revelations.
Indeed. Well, Scott, before we let you go, let's talk about that House task force investigating the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. They're supposed to get a briefing today. The Secret Service talking. What are you hearing about that?
It'll be a virtual briefing with the Secret Service and members of this task force, and they have now expanded this task force. It was originally the task force to investigate the July 13th attempt on Trump's life in Butler, Pennsylvania. It is now a task force investigating 2 alleged assassination attempts in 2 months.
Well, we said right off the top there would be a lot of news-making items to talk to you about. Scott MacFarlane, you proved our point. Thank you so much for knowing so much about all of them today. Let's jump the map now to New York, where the former president will hold a campaign rally later today on Long Island. This is one of Trump's first rallies since that second attempt on his life. We know security will be tight. Secret Service already under a lot of scrutiny. We can show you right here, crowds are already starting to gather outside that Nassau Coliseum. CBS News New York's Carolyn Gussoff joins us now live from Uniondale, where Trump supporters have been lining up since this morning. Looks like a pretty robust crowd there. Carolyn, walk us through the security measures.
Absolutely. People have been pouring in on foot and in cars and trucks with flags waving, American flags and Trump and MAGA flags. And they've been doing it since very early this morning amid a very high level of security. We've seen mounted police officers. We've seen bomb-sniffing dogs, sharpshooters on buildings. Nassau County Police had said that this would be the safest place in the nation today, as this is the former president's first rally since the second apparent attempt on his life. And in fact, that police commissioner was the one to unlock the gates this morning and let everyone in, an apparent solidification of that commitment that this would be a very high security event today. So we see it on the buildings around us, as now thousands are likely inside. The Nassau Coliseum holds 16,000 people, and this parking lot is just about filled up.
Election day not many weeks away, and we are starting to see the crowds really gather on both sides of the ticket. Thank you so much, Carolyn, for that glimpse. So on the Democrat side, a short time ago, Vice President Kamala Harris delivered remarks at the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute's Leadership Conference. Her address is in observance of Hispanic Heritage Month. So we'll continue watching that and bring whatever headlines come out of what she had to say to you on CBS News 24/7. But let's fire up the cameras pointed at Baltimore through our monitors right now. People there expect to get wet today. Jess?
You know, and as we head into the next couple days, we're going to continue to see just some active storms all along that east coast, now specifically up in the northeast. So I'm going to turn the globe on real fast, and I want to show you the tropics. As we head into the coming days, the big story for us is just some quiet tropical activity, which is actually good news. Potential tropical cyclone 8, that's what's all that leftover storm activity up in the northeast right now. That's what's still causing some issues when it comes to potential flooding, or at least yesterday's flood advisories. And of course, now we're just dealing with some active thunderstorm activity from Boston stretching down into New York. So let's drop the globe real fast, and I want to show you what's going on behind me. Here's the leftover. You can almost see a little bit of circulation still from this system as it continues to move its way into Pennsylvania, all throughout Delaware, Massachusetts as well. This system right here will continue to bring in some heavy rain for friends close to New York and New Jersey as we head into the next 48 hours. Here's the rainfall totals. For now, we can see anywhere up to around close to an inch of rain up near Boston, and there's even more active weather the more east or the more west we go, closer to states like Montana, stretching down into Texas. And I'm going to have more on that in a bit and how that's really going to shape the forecast for us as we head into the coming days, Reed.
Okay, Jess, thank you so much for keeping us all informed. When we come back, the Department of Justice telling a group, see you in court. So it's a legal fight about to go down. It concerns the crash and collapse of that Francis Scott Key Bridge. We're back in a second. Watching another big court case in New York today. Harvey Weinstein set to appear in court to be arraigned on 3 new sex crimes charges. This is after last week's grand jury indictment. Here's CBS New York's Alice Gaynor with that story.
Harvey Weinstein is expected in court around 2:30 Eastern time. The new indictment has yet to be unsealed, so we don't know the new charges just yet. At a hearing last week, his attorney said they believed it could include up to 3 additional allegations dating back to 2005. Prosecutors have said the grand jury heard evidence of up to 3 alleged assaults at 2 Manhattan hotels and a residential building. The 72-year-old was not arraigned last week because he underwent emergency surgery related to fluid on the heart and lungs. Weinstein is set to be retried in mid-November after New York's highest appeals court overturned his 2020 conviction on rape and sex assault, ruling the judge unfairly allowed other women to testify about allegations not a part of the case. They were Molyneux witnesses allowed at trial to show prior bad acts. Manhattan prosecutors say they plan to file a motion to consolidate this new indictment with his retrial. A defense attorney for Weinstein says they would prefer to keep things separate and not combine them. Though his New York conviction was overturned, he is still serving a 16-year sentence after a rape conviction in Los Angeles. Again, Harvey Weinstein is expected to be in court around 2:30 Eastern time this afternoon. Outside of Manhattan Criminal Court, Alice Gaynor, CBS News, New York.
Alice, thank you for that. CBS News 24/7 moving on our map to Baltimore now, where the Justice Department filed suit over that bridge collapse. What do they want? $100 million in cleanup costs. That is the amount the government says they had to spend to clear underwater debris to reopen the port after a ship lost power and struck a support column on that Francis Scott Key Bridge in March. That lawsuit alleges the electrical and mechanical systems on the ship were improperly maintained. Let's jump the virtual map now to the state of Hawaii, where the FBI raided the Hawaiian home of the man arrested in the suspected assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump in Florida over the weekend. They are on the hunt for any evidence about what could have motivated Ryan Ruth. Evidence is needed right now to be able to really tie Ruth to the golf club and a motive to kill or harm former President Donald Trump. While they search there in Hawaii, journalists in that same state reveal a lot of stories about Ruth's run-ins with customers of his company. Former customers report that Ruth's tiny home business left their projects in a mess and caused them to lose thousands of dollars. Let's go from thousands of dollars to hundreds of millions of dollars potentially. Boeing CEO says that company, they will begin furloughing executives and other non-union workers to save cash during the strike that's going on in real time. Talks continue today between Boeing and their workers. The company and its striking employees failed to agree on issues of wages and pensions yesterday, so they're back at the table today. Those workers allege the company is not taking mediation seriously. Now this. Our CBS News Eye in America series keeps us rooted in our core value, your stories in your communities. This has been an especially divisive election cycle. It's marked by the kind of rhetoric that is hurting our national unity. CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent Major Garrett visited the battleground state of North Carolina to see how people there from all parts of the political spectrum are navigating these turbulent times and waters of the election season.
On the western edge of swing state North Carolina cuts the Nantahala River, an unlikely spot for an experiment in reconciliation. About 30 Americans came here to navigate the Nantahala on rafts and probe the limits of political estrangement.
I am a Southern Baptist fiscal conservative.
I am open-minded politically.
I'm pragmatic progressive is what I call myself.
They are liberals and conservatives, independents and libertarians, sure to oppose one another on all manner of ideas and issues.
We don't talk about what's working enough.
We've turned away from God, for one thing.
We have lost so much of our humility.
But they're willing to talk and paddle together toward something deeper.
As Americans, we really are all in the same boat together.
Ken Powley is the organizer, a career rafting guide with no professional political experience who worries deeply about American alienation.
I'm the guy that always thought of democracy like the air you breathe. It's always going to be there.
Powley set about this work the day after the Capitol riot, deciding to devote his retirement years to binding our political wounds.
What is the essence of this experiment?
Bringing people together with different points of view has become difficult, and what we're finding is that what unites us is a lot more powerful than what separates us.
The Reverend Rodney Sadler came along for the ride.
I'm not fond of Trump at all.
Sadler, a self-described liberal from Charlotte, landed in the same boat as conservative Lance Mosley, an actor and PR professional who lives out of an RV.
I don't understand why everybody's so afraid of Trump. He's better for the country. That's my view.
Lance and the Reverend found things chilly at first. So did everyone on their boat.
So we've disagreed on everything.
Yeah.
You're Samsung, I'm iPhone.
Yeah, we don't even agree on anything.
The rafts made their way down the Nantahala's rapids with teamwork and enthusiasm.
Everybody's closer to each other than we think.
No matter who we might vote for or anything else. So I think this is a great first step.
Near the end, choppy waters tossed one rafter harmlessly overboard. A day on the river buoyed Reverend Sadler and Lance Mosley.
I think we are so divided that we don't spend the time to get to know people as human beings.
By the end of the trip, we were finally talking deeper politics.
Yeah.
Love you, brother.
Enjoyed you, brother.
Oh, man, I did too.
Cynics will find all of this a bit too tidy.
How much does the river have to do with it?
This isn't really about rafting. The point of it is that when we play together, it allows us to form relationships that otherwise we would never even consider.
This touches you. I've seen it in your eyes.
It does touch me because it's so crystal clear that we are so much better than what we're showing.
For Ken Powley, a river runs through that noble pursuit. For Eye on America, I'm Major Garrett on the Nantahala River in North Carolina.
Major proving a major point, and that is this: we need each other. Hey, you see that podium right there? That's our live camera and our monitors watching that podium. Fed Chair Jerome Powell about to step to that, and for the first time in 4 years, slash interest rates. Will it be a quarter? Will it be a half? We'll let you know on CBS News 24/7.